Hello everyone, PDF 44. So, now I'm going to talk about the rivals. The team we love to hate here in Lakerland, the Celtics. I'm not going to talk about their history. I'm not going to talk about anything that would bring up old stuff. That's not the angle I'm taking. I'm talking about them right now and who they've been over the last couple years. How I've been viewing Danny Ainge and the decisions, some of the decisions that he's made. This is what I think of the Celtics right now. And the reason why Kyrie Irving isn't there right now. They are a vault. You know, like banks put a bunch of money in there. A vault. That is what the Celtics are and have been for the last several years. A plethora of draft picks and high draft pick assets, players that have been drafted very high that weren't necessarily put together for the purpose of having a cohesive basketball team, but just more or less hoarded. like grandma hoards just about every newspaper since 1967. Like that kind of hoarded. We're talking about a team who really didn't have any cohesion in mind when they were constructed. That's what I'm looking at when I see that team. And that is why Kyrie Irving appeared to not be able to lead a team like that. Or rather, not appear to be a good leader. You know, that's the word around town, that he didn't do his job in making sure that team had the support on the floor that they needed to kind of deal with the circumstances that they were faced with, which was obviously him and Gordon Hayward coming back from injury after, you know, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier had a long playoff run, you know, as starting players. That situation was mishandled so terribly because no matter how you look at it, Gordon Hayward would have been better and the team would have been better had he started this season on the bench. Kyrie Irving is a little different, obviously, because of who he is and what year in his contract he's in. There's no way you bring him off the bench, so somebody was going to have to suffer. But the rotations did not have to suffer as bad as they did to start the season, to leave people thinking, you know, that they would be better off elsewhere instead of being on their team. I think that's the mistake that Danny Ainge has made in accumulating all these draft picks and accumulating all these players. He never began to mold an actual team. He's still in the process of managing the vault. So it shows on the floor. I mean, you can have the best coach in the world, in which I think they may. And Brad Stevens, even though he's made some mistakes over the last 2 years and make people question where he's at, X's and O's wise, we know he can put together a system that is balanced in both offense and defense, and can really compete at an extremely high level. His system brings that to the table no matter who's on the team. But asking him to manage all of that nonsense, you know, yeah, that's gonna take something from him in terms of his reputation as a great coach, and I believe it has. But I think he can gain that back. To me, going forward, it looks like they're starting to get it. Letting Al Horford go was interesting. Obviously, I don't know the circumstances surrounding that. For all I know, he demanded out and didn't care nothing about returning there. Kyrie Irving, of course, was determined to leave and move on to the Nets with KD. So that was done. But the signing of Kemba Walker, I thought, was pretty solid. He was the first piece that I thought that they brought in. How do you say this? Like, they had a vision for how a basketball team should be run, and they brought this piece in. He's the first piece since Al Horford that I felt that they did that. In regards to, I guess that's what I'm saying. Everybody else that they brought in was either brought in through trade or just inherited through trades. You know, obviously for draft picks, and then you draft these players because they're high draft picks, and you take the best player on the board or what have you. But it didn't seem like there was any real cohesion there. There's no vision, is what I'm trying to say. They didn't have a vision for a team, constructing a squad. It was more so just, okay, we're going to keep these pieces, and we got all this valuable stuff, and we'll flip it for Anthony Davis. That was the initial plan. they've had their eyes on Anthony Davis for years, but there was never a moment in time where they put together a squad that would make Anthony Davis, or anyone else for that matter, believe in their position on that squad. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, okay, when are you going to start showing me what you can do in terms of putting together a basketball team? Because we haven't seen that. You know, quite honestly, you're hoarding picks, you're hoarding this, you're hoarding that. It's like players are just here just because they're very, very talented out of college or high school or what have you. I mean, they were just brought in not necessarily to play ball, but to be valuable so that you can do other things with them. At some point, you got to say, okay, now it's time to put a basketball team together. Now it's time to take all these picks and turn them into something championship worthy. And even though they've been able to compete because of the value of everybody and the talent that comes with those people who are talent or are valuable, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a cohesive basketball team. And that is what we've seen. So if you ever hear me say Boston is a vault, or Boston has never actually been a basketball team in this era, they've just been a series of valuable pieces, that's what I'm referring to. I figured it was important to make this video because I'm going to often refer to the Celtics as a vault, or probably already have in some of my videos. But that's how I view them, and how I have viewed them for the last several years. Especially looking at all the draft picks that they've put together. It's just like, I think they're at a point where they're at a limit for draft picks. The draft picks that they have, they could lose if they don't create space for them or something like that. I believe that was the circumstance. A Boston fan would probably know. But they were in a position like that to where they had gotten to a point where their draft picks, they could actually lose them, or lose players trying to fill spots for those draft picks because they must use them. It was a circumstance like that, from what I understood it to be. So, yeah, this is open the vault, dude. Turn some of that stuff into actual players. I think Kemba Walker is the first real visionary piece that they've had, outside of maybe what they drafted last year, which hasn't really panned out yet. Some of the guys that they've drafted, I will go as far as to say that some of the guys that the Celtics have drafted haven't panned out, man. You're waiting on them just like anybody else, but with the exception of maybe Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, I can't name a Celtic draft pick that I've liked that has really done anything since Terry Rozier, and he was one of the first ones to get there, if not the first one to get there. So, yeah, I think the Boston Celtics could easily turn, like, for example, if they want to take on Bradley Beal's contract, they have the assets to get him. As to where some of these other teams who would want him may not necessarily have that. The Boston Celtics have always had that. And going forward, I would imagine they still have draft picks that they can use to make this team something that they can be proud of, I guess you could say. Stop blaming Kyrie Irving for why he couldn't make that mesh. Circumstances weren't possible. Okay? Stop that. I've been hearing people do that for a long time. They say that it was his fault that people weren't cohesive. You got a bunch of alphas on the team. They're all alpha-minded because they were all high draft picks. They're not looking at Kyrie Irving like we can't keep up with this dude. They're saying, well, give me more minutes and I'll prove to you that I can lead this team too. Every last one of them dudes is doing that. So it's like, that's not cohesive, man. That's not a recipe for success. And then on top of it, when you pull those players out of circumstances where they've been successful together and then place other guys in those positions because they've made money and because you have to justify their contracts, you're not taking into account not only that, but also what it takes to get that high contract into its proper value. You got to bring a guy like Gordon Hayward along slowly, coming from what injury that he had. Since we're talking about the Celtics, this allows me to say some things about Gordon Hayward. I really believe in Gordon Hayward as a player, and I understood how he made his money. It was through his supreme athleticism, quickness, and strength that allowed him to dart around, fly all over the place. That's how he got hurt, because he was catching a crazy lob and landed, obviously, and it messed him up real bad. We saw it. I don't have to bring up too much of that, but, I mean, he has to get in shape. That's the basis of what I'm saying. It's going to take a long, long time for him to get the athleticism that he had back, if it can come back. So, That's where he made his money. He was always in tip-top shape. He was always a guy that was running nonstop, always a guy who had quick twitch muscles, that kind of thing. And, he used his body to be able to get in the passing lanes. He was a good, solid shooter, a little better than solid, actually, a big-time scorer, and he played above the rim a lot of the time. So until he can get that back, he's going to be a liability at times. Yeah, he shows flashes and glimpses, but it's going to take maybe 2 years, for him to get back into that kind of shape, if he can. So asking him to be in the starting lineup directly after recovering from that injury was just bad in every way, just about every way. And it did ruin their season. And they want to blame it on Kyrie? No, that was what ruined their season. Asking Jaylen Brown, who was a playoff player at that point, and Terry Rozier, who were playoff players at that point, already had an established cachet about their names because of it, to take bench roles so that you can get this guy back in the game and get him his proper minutes based on his outstanding contract. So it's just bad for everybody. It didn't work, and because of it, the Celtics are now down both Al Horford and Kyrie Irving. So going forward, we'll see what they do. They just picked up Enes Kanter. I like him offensively. I like him for the locker room in terms of being a rah-rah guy. He keeps things exciting. But is he the answer at center? I don't think so. Not in terms of what you need going up against guys like Joel Embiid. No, he going to get ate up. That's a fact. It just is what it is. So Kemba's going to be Kemba, but no disrespect to Kemba, but you need more than Kemba to compete. That's been shown to us his whole career. Jason Tatum took some steps back last year because of what I said. Jaylen Brown, same thing, because of what I said. And what you got to understand about Jaylen Brown is Jaylen Brown's coming along slowly. He earned his right to be in that circumstance the year before last when he was in the playoffs putting up big numbers. He's a guy who's been a slow burn in his own way. He wasn't a bust by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a slow burn. This is a guy whose numbers came along slowly every year and earned his way into the starting lineup after being behind people and not really playing a full usage of minutes. Drafted, if I'm not mistaken, third in that draft. He has high hopes for his career, and the Celtics have turned him into basically a role player. He ain't going to be happy in that circumstance. As soon as he gets a chance to get out of Boston, I guarantee he's out of there. So they do best to trade him, in my opinion, because I just don't I foresee no future for him being happy in Boston. I really don't. Jason Tatum a little different because Jason Tatum is going to always have his starting spot based on cachet. Wherever he goes, he's going to start. He's a big-time guy. He just has that aura about him, and coaches are going to believe in him no matter where he finds himself. But I can't imagine that Boston is the greatest place in the world for him right now. Yeah, his role is going to be bigger than it was last year, based on Kyrie Irving's departure. But I'm not certain that Kemba Walker is the kind of guy that's going to pass the rock as much as guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown need him to in order to shine like they're going to need to shine. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Celtics do. If I'm Danny Ainge, with all the assets that I have, I can do some big things, very big things. But you have to be willing to strike on deals. There have been many deals that Danny could have struck on that could have probably brought the Boston Celtics to the finals that he just decided not to strike on because he was hoarding all of these assets. So until he comes to terms with being okay with letting go of some of those assets and trusting his ability to capture more of them in the future, the team is not going to be cohesive, no matter who they bring in. So that's my take on the Celtics. Of course, I hate the Celtics with a passion, but I analyze teams as best I can objectively. So I wasn't a Laker fan over the last 14 minutes. I was just a guy looking at the Celtics, and that's how I try to put myself in that mindset. But yeah, F the Celtics forever. I will never appreciate you guys. As long as you're bad, I'm happy, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Anyway, take care. BDF. Go Lakers.